The divorce papers landed on the mahogany conference table with a sharp slap that echoed through the sterile legal office. I stared at my name printed in cold black letters. Eulalia Vane, respondent. The word felt like a slap across my face. How had it come to this? How had my quiet, predictable husband Graham transformed into this calculating stranger sitting across from me with his lawyer, methodically destroying everything I thought I could control? Mrs. Vane, the attorney's voice cut through my shock, your husband has documented evidence of adultery, emotional abandonment of your daughter, and financial misconduct. Do you have legal representation? My hands trembled as I looked at Graham. His face was stone. No emotion, no anger, just cold, methodical resolve. This wasn't the man who used to bring me coffee in bed every Sunday morning. This wasn't the man who had proposed to me with shaking hands in Central Park 7 years ago. But let me start from the beginning, because everyone needs to understand how we got here, how I went from being a wife and mother to sitting alone in a legal office, watching my entire life crumble while my husband calmly discussed custody arrangements for our 7-year-old daughter. 6 months earlier, I was standing in our kitchen at 7:30 p.m., staring at another reheated dinner plate. Graham was late again. His consulting firm had landed some major IT contract, and he'd been working 12-hour days for weeks. I scraped his untouched lasagna into the garbage disposal, listening to it grind away like my patience. "Mummy, is Daddy coming home tonight?" Ivy asked from the kitchen table, her homework spread around her like a paper fortress. At 7 years old, she already knew the routine. Daddy works late, Mommy eats alone. Family time happens in 15-minute increments between phone calls and client emergencies. "Of course, sweetie. Daddy's just helping people fix their computers." The lie came easily. Graham wasn't just fixing computers anymore. He was designing entire network infrastructures, managing million-dollar projects, building a career that seemed to matter more than building a marriage. My phone buzzed. A text from Graham. "Sorry, running late again. Don't wait up. Big presentation tomorrow." I stared at the message, feeling something cold settle in my chest. When was the last time he'd asked about my day? When was the last time he'd noticed that I'd started wearing makeup to work again? Or that I'd lost 15 pounds? Or that I'd been staying late at the office myself? Don't wait up. Like I was some roommate instead of his wife. I called my sister Anya while helping Ivy with her math homework. "He's doing it again," I said without preamble. "Working late?" Anya's voice carried that familiar note of sympathy mixed with frustration. She'd been listening to me complain about Graham's work schedule for months. "It's not just the work, Anya. It's like I'm invisible." This morning I told him I was thinking about redecorating the living room, and he just grunted and kept reading his emails. I could have said I was thinking about burning the house down and gotten the same response. "Have you tried talking to him? Really talking?" I almost laughed. "When? Between his conference calls and his weekend work sessions. Yesterday I wore that blue dress he used to love, and he didn't even notice. I felt like an idiot." After I hung up, I sat in our empty living room, scrolling through Facebook. Everyone else seemed so happy. Anya and her husband Greg had just posted photos from their weekend getaway to the mountains. My friend Mia had shared a romantic dinner photo with her boyfriend, all candles and wine glasses and adoring looks. When had Graham last looked at me like that? My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Graham. "Hey, Eulalia. Hope you don't mind me texting. Got your number from the office directory. Just wanted to say thanks for helping me navigate the Johnson account today. You saved my neck." Marcello Ford, the new project manager who'd started at our accounting firm 3 weeks ago. 29 years old, Italian heritage, with dark hair and the kind of smile that made the receptionist stutter. He'd been assigned the desk next to mine, and we'd been working together on several client accounts. I stared at the text for a long moment. When was the last time Graham had thanked me for anything? When was the last time anyone had noticed my work, my help, my existence? I typed back, No problem. Happy to help any time. His response came quickly. You're a lifesaver. I owe you dinner. My heart did a little flutter. It was innocent, right? Just a colleague being friendly. But as I sat alone in my quiet house, with my husband working late again, and my daughter asleep upstairs, it felt like the first time in months that someone had actually seen me. Graham didn't come home until after 10 p.m. I was already in bed, pretending to read, when I heard his key in the lock. He moved quietly through the house, probably assuming I was asleep. When he finally slipped into bed beside me, he smelled like coffee and stress. How was your day? I asked softly. Long. Sorry about dinner. This Morrison project is killing me. I know, it's fine. He was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe he'd ask about my day, or notice that I was wearing the silk nightgown he'd bought me for my birthday last year. Instead, he rolled over and mumbled, I might have to work this weekend too. The client wants to move up the deadline. I lay in the dark, listening to his breathing even out into sleep, feeling like a stranger in my own bed. My phone sat on the nightstand, and I found myself thinking about Marcello's text, about the way he'd smiled when I'd explained the filing system, about how he'd actually listened when I talked. The next morning, Graham was gone before I woke up. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Can you pick up Ivy today? Thanks. Thanks. Like I was the babysitter instead of her mother. At work, Marcello was waiting by my desk with 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need caffeine after yesterday's marathon session with the Johnson files, he said, handing me a perfectly made latte. You didn't have to do that, I said, but I was smiling. When was the last time Graham had brought me coffee without being asked? I wanted to. Besides, I need to stay on your good side. I'm still figuring out half these systems. We worked together most of the morning, and I found myself laughing more than I had in weeks. Marcello was funny, attentive, and best of all, he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. When I mentioned that I'd studied art history in college, he didn't change the subject like Graham always did. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about my favorite periods, my abandoned dreams of working in a museum. Why didn't you pursue it? He asked during our lunch break. Life, I guess. Got married, had Ivy, needed a steady paycheck. The answer sounded hollow even to me. It's never too late, you know. There are part-time programs, online courses. My sister went back to school when her kids were older. The idea sparked something in me that had been dormant for years. When was the last time Graham had encouraged my dreams instead of just accepting my sacrifices? That evening, I tried to share my excitement with Graham. I was thinking about maybe taking some art history courses online. You know, just for fun. He looked up from his laptop for exactly 3 seconds. That's nice, honey. Whatever makes you happy. Whatever makes you happy. The dismissive phrase that meant he wasn't really listening, wasn't really engaged, wasn't really there even when he was sitting right next to me. My phone buzzed. Marcello again. Been thinking about our conversation today. Found this online program that might interest you. He'd attached a link to a part-time art history master's program. I stared at the message, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Someone had been thinking about me. Someone cared enough to follow up on my dreams. I glanced at Graham, still absorbed in his work, and typed back, "This looks amazing. Thank you for thinking of me." Hard not to think about someone as interesting as you. I should have deleted the message. I should have put down my phone and tried harder with my husband. I should have recognized the line being crossed. Instead, I saved his number under a heart emoji and went to bed feeling noticed for the first time in months. The office happy hour invitation came on a Thursday. Celebrating the Morrison project completion, the email read, drinks at Murphy's Pub, 6 p.m. Team members and spouses welcome. I mentioned it to Graham that morning over breakfast. Want to come with me tonight? It might be fun to meet my coworkers. He didn't look up from his phone. Can't. Conference call with the West Coast team at 7. You go ahead. Of course, another conference call, another evening alone. I looked at Ivy, carefully spreading peanut butter on her toast, and felt that familiar stab of resentment. When had I become a single parent in a two-parent household? At work, Marcello stopped by my desk around 3 p.m. You coming tonight? For a little while. Graham can't make it. Something flickered in his eyes. His loss. You'll be the most beautiful woman there. The compliment hit me like a physical thing. When was the last time Graham had called me beautiful? When was the last time he'd even really looked at me? I went home to change, telling myself I was just dressing professionally. But I chose the black dress that hugged my curves, the one that made my eyes look bigger and my waist look smaller. I spent 20 minutes on my makeup and actually used the curling iron. Graham was already on his conference call when I left. He waved absently from his home office, barely glancing up from his computer screen. Murphy's pub was crowded and warm, filled with the comfortable noise of after-work conversations. I spotted my coworkers at a large table in the back and made my way over, suddenly self-conscious about my dress. "Eulalia, you look stunning," Marcello said, standing to pull out a chair next to him. "What are you drinking?" "White wine, please." He returned with a glass of Chardonnay and slid into the seat beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "So where's the mysterious husband tonight?" "Working, always working." The words came out more bitter than I intended. "His loss is my gain," Marcello said quietly, and I felt my cheeks flush. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine. Marcello was an attentive listener, asking about Ivy, my job, my life. He told me about growing up in Boston, his family's restaurant business, his dreams of starting his own consulting firm someday. "You're so easy to talk to," I said, realizing I was slightly tipsy. "I feel like we could talk for hours." "I'd like that," he said, his eyes holding mine a beat too long. Around 8 p.m., my phone rang. "Graham." "Hey," I answered, stepping away from the table. "Just checking in. How's the party?" "It's nice. Good to socialize with coworkers for once." "That's great. Don't stay out too late. I'll probably be working until midnight, so don't wait up." "Don't wait up." Again. Like I was some obligation he needed to manage, rather than a wife he wanted to come home to. "Fine," I said, hanging up with more force than necessary. When I returned to the table, most of my coworkers had left. It was just Marcello and me, and somehow the atmosphere had shifted into something more intimate. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just my husband, making sure I'm not having too much fun." "Are you? Having fun, I mean." I looked at him, really looked at him. The way he leaned forward when I talked, like my words mattered. The way he smiled when I laughed. The way he made me feel seen and interesting and alive. "More fun than I've had in months," I admitted. "Good. You deserve to have fun, Eulalia. You deserve to be appreciated." The words hung between us, loaded with possibility and danger. I should have left then, should have gone home to my distant husband and my sleeping daughter and my quiet, predictable life. Instead, I ordered another wine. We talked until the pub started emptying out, our conversation growing more personal with each passing hour. He told me about his ex-girlfriend who'd left him for her yoga instructor. I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone. How lonely I felt in my marriage, how invisible I'd become, how I sometimes wondered if this was all there was to life. "You're not invisible to me," he said softly. "You're the most vibrant woman I've met in years." When he offered to walk me to my car, I didn't protest. The night air was cool against my flushed cheeks, and I was acutely aware of his presence beside me. When we reached my Honda, he turned to face me. "I had a really good time tonight," he said. "Me too." We stood there for a moment, the space between us charged with tension. I knew what was happening. I knew I should get in my car and drive away and pretend this was just innocent coworker friendship. Instead, when he stepped closer, I didn't step back. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then hungrier. I melted into it, into him, feeling desired and wanted for the first time in months. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless. "I should go," I whispered, but I didn't move. "I know," he said, but his hand was still on my waist. We kissed again, longer this time, and I felt something inside me crack open. Some wall I'd built around my heart, some resignation I'd accepted about my life. When I finally drove home, my lips still tingling, Graham was asleep on the couch with his laptop open on his chest. I covered him with a blanket and went upstairs alone, staring at myself in the bathroom mirror. My lipstick was gone, my hair mussed, my eyes bright with something I'd almost forgotten existed. I looked alive. The next morning, Graham was already gone when I woke up. Another early meeting, another day of putting work before family. I found his note on the kitchen counter. "Thanks for covering pickup again. Big day today." Thanks for covering pickup. Like parenting our daughter was a favor I was doing him instead of a responsibility we shared. My phone buzzed. "Marcello. Good morning, beautiful. Can't stop thinking about last night." I stared at the message, my heart racing. I should delete it, should block his number, should confess everything to Graham and beg for forgiveness. Instead, I typed back, "Me neither." His response came immediately. "Have lunch with me today, please." I hesitated for exactly 3 seconds before typing, "Yes." Sunday dinner at Graham's parents' house had always been a tradition, but lately, it felt more like a performance. I sat at Therese and Peter Vane's dining room table, picking at my roast beef, while Graham's mother fussed over everyone's plates, and his father discussed the latest political developments with the enthusiasm of a man who'd finally retired from his law practice. "Eulalia, you look lovely today," Therese said, refilling my wine glass. "That color really suits you." I smiled and thanked her, acutely aware that the blue dress I was wearing had been Marcello's favorite when I'd worn it to lunch last week. The memory of his compliment, "You look incredible in blue," sent a little thrill through me that I quickly suppressed. Graham sat beside me, methodically cutting his meat and contributing the occasional grunt to the conversation. He'd been even more distant lately, if that was possible. Our lunch meetings, I'd started thinking of them as dates, though I tried not to, had become the highlight of my week. Marcello listened when I talked. He asked questions about my day, my thoughts, my feelings. He made me feel like a woman instead of just a wife and mother going through the motions. "How's work going, Graham?" Peter asked. "That Morrison project wrapped up, didn't it?" "Finally. Started the Henderson account this week. Bigger scope, more complex infrastructure needs." "That's wonderful, dear," Therese said. "You work so hard. I hope you're taking care of yourself." I almost choked on my wine. Taking care of himself? What about taking care of his family? When was the last time anyone had asked if I was taking care of myself? "Actually," I said, setting down my glass with more force than necessary, "Graham's been working so much lately that Ivy barely sees him. Yesterday she asked me if Daddy still lived here." The table went quiet. Graham's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Eulalia," he said quietly, "that's not fair." "Isn't it? When was the last time you read her a bedtime story? When was the last time you asked about her school day? I'm building a career, providing for our family. I thought that mattered to you." Providing money isn't the same as providing presents, Graham. Ivy needs her father, not just his paycheck. Therese cleared her throat uncomfortably. "I'm sure Graham is doing his best to balance everything." "Is he?" I turned to look at my husband, really look at him. Because from where I sit, it feels like work comes first, second and third. Family gets whatever's left over. "That's not true," Graham said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Really? Name one thing about Ivy's life this week, one thing that happened at school, one friend she played with, one book she's reading." Graham stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The silence stretched until Peter coughed and reached for the salt. "She's reading Charlotte's Web," I continued. She lost her first tooth on Wednesday and was devastated because the tooth fairy forgot to come, because you forgot to tell me she'd put it under her pillow. Her best friend Emma is moving to California next month, and she's been crying about it every night. But you wouldn't know any of that because you're never actually present, even when you're home. Eulalia, please, Therese said. This isn't the place. When is the place? I demanded. At home, where he's always on his laptop. In the car, where he's always on conference calls. When exactly am I supposed to discuss my marriage with my husband? Graham's face had gone red, but not with anger, with embarrassment. Good. Maybe it was time he felt a little of the humiliation I'd been carrying around for months. You know what's funny? I continued, my voice getting sharper. I used to think I married a man who would be a partner, someone who would share the load, share the responsibilities, share the actual experience of building a life together. Instead, I got a roommate who pays half the bills and occasionally shows up for dinner. That's enough, Graham said, his voice tight. Is it? Because I'm just getting started. Do you know what our daughter said to me last week? She said, Mommy, why doesn't Daddy like us anymore? How do you think that made me feel? How do you think I was supposed to answer that? The lie came so easily I almost believed it myself. Ivy had never said anything like that, but the effect was immediate. Therese gasped. Peter set down his fork, and Graham looked like I'd slapped him. She never said that, Graham said quietly. Didn't she? Or maybe you just weren't paying attention. Again. I could see the doubt creeping into his eyes, the guilt taking hold. Part of me felt sick for manipulating him this way, but a larger part felt vindicated. Finally, he was feeling some of the pain I'd been carrying alone. Maybe, I said, my voice softening into something that sounded like wounded patience. If you spent half as much energy on your family as you do on your clients, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Ivy, who had been playing quietly in the living room, seemed to sense the tension when she joined us for dessert. She climbed into Graham's lap, and I watched his face soften as he held her. Daddy, will you read me a story tonight? She asked. Of course, sweetheart. Which one do you want? Charlotte's Web. Mummy's been reading it to me, but I like your voices better. I felt a stab of guilt watching them together. Graham was a good father when he was present. The problem was how rarely he was present. But seeing Ivy's face light up when he paid attention to her reminded me of what we'd all lost in his pursuit of career success. After dinner, while Therese and I cleared the dishes, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. Honey, I know marriage is hard, but maybe you could try talking to Graham privately instead of embarrassing him in front of family. Embarrassing him? I turned to face her, my hands gripping the dish towel. What about how embarrassed I am every time someone asks about my husband and I have to make excuses for why he's never around? What about how embarrassed Ivy is when she's the only kid at the school play without a father in the audience? I understand you're frustrated. Do you? Because it feels like everyone expects me to just smile and be grateful that he works hard, while nobody asks whether he's working hard at being a husband and father. Therese sighed, looking older than her 62 years. Men show love differently, dear. Graham's father was the same way. Worked long hours, provided well, but wasn't always emotionally available. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you. Maybe that was enough for your generation, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. But I need more than financial security and good intentions. I need a partner who actually wants to be present for our life together. That night, driving home in separate cars, I felt my phone buzz with a text from Marcello. Hope you had a good day. Thinking of you. The simple message made me smile for the first time all day. Here was someone who thought about me, who reached out just to let me know I mattered. When was the last time Graham had sent me a text like that? I waited until we were home, and Ivy was in bed before responding. Long day. Would love to talk tomorrow if you have time. His response was immediate. Always have time for you. Lunch? Yes, please. When I went upstairs, Graham was in his office again, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when I passed the doorway and mouthed, "Sorry," while pointing at his phone. Sorry, the word that had become his default response to everything. Sorry I'm working late. Sorry I missed dinner. Sorry I can't talk right now. Sorry I'm not the husband you married. I went to bed alone, again, thinking about Marcello's text and the way he made me feel seen and valued and alive. Graham didn't come to bed until after midnight, and when he did, he slipped in quietly, assuming I was asleep. I wasn't. I was lying there wondering when my marriage had become something to endure instead of something to enjoy, and whether the man texting me goodnight from across town might be showing me what I was missing. The morning I found Graham's laptop open to a folder labeled Receipts, my blood turned to ice water. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, the screen still glowing, and I could see file names that made my stomach drop. Phone records, March, credit card statements, office security logs. I heard the shower running upstairs and quickly scrolled through the folder. Screenshots of text messages, my text messages with Marcello, printed emails about lunch meetings that I'd claimed were client consultations. Even a photo of my car in the parking lot of the Italian restaurant where Marcello and I had shared our first real kiss last week. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. How long had he been collecting evidence? How much did he know? The shower stopped. I forced myself to act normal, starting the coffee maker and pulling out ingredients for Ivy's lunch. When Graham came downstairs, dressed in his usual work clothes, I searched his face for any sign of anger or confrontation. Nothing. He kissed my cheek absently, poured his coffee into a travel mug, and checked his phone. "Working late again tonight," he said without looking up. "Don't wait up." The casual tone made it worse somehow. If he knew what I'd been doing, why wasn't he screaming? Why wasn't he demanding explanations or threatening divorce? The Graham I married would have confronted me immediately, emotions running hot. This cold, calculating version was a stranger. "Graham," I started, then stopped. What could I say? "I'm sorry I've been having an emotional affair. I'm sorry I've been lying to you for months. I'm sorry I've been getting from another man what I should be getting from you." "What?" He finally looked at me, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or disappointment. Then it was gone, replaced by that neutral expression he'd been wearing for weeks. "Nothing. Have a good day." He left without another word, and I spent the morning in a panic. I called in sick to work and spent hours going through our shared computer, our phone records, our credit card statements, trying to figure out what evidence he might have gathered. It was worse than I thought. He had everything. Every lunch date I'd claimed was a work meeting. Every late night I'd said I was staying at the office when I was really having drinks with Marcello. Every lie I'd told, documented with timestamps and receipts. My phone rang. Marcello. "Hey, beautiful. Missed you at work today. Everything okay?" "I think Graham knows," I whispered, as if saying it quietly would make it less true. "Knows what?" "About us, about the lunches, the texts, everything." There was a long pause. "What makes you think that?" I told him about the laptop, the files, the evidence. With each detail, the silence on his end grew heavier. "Marcello, I'm here, this is complicated." "Complicated?" Something cold settled in my chest. "What do you mean, complicated?" "I mean, I care about you, Eulalia, but I'm not looking to get involved in a messy divorce. I thought this was just, I don't know, something fun, something light. Something fun, something light." The words hit me like physical blows. "What are we doing here, Marcello? What is this between us?" Another pause. "I think maybe we should cool things down for a while. Until you figure out your situation at home." "My situation?" My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "You mean my marriage? The marriage you've been encouraging me to complain about for months." "I never encouraged anything. I just listened." "You did more than listen. You kissed me. You told me I deserved better. You made me feel like… Like what? Like someone could actually want me. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Eulalia, I do want you, but I'm not ready for all this drama. Maybe when things settle down. When things settled down, I repeated numbly. Right. I hung up and sat in my empty kitchen, staring at my phone. In the span of one morning, I'd lost my husband's trust and my… What? My boyfriend, my affair partner. What exactly had Marcello been to me? When Ivy came home from school, she found me crying at the kitchen table. Mummy, why are you sad? I wiped my eyes quickly. Just having a hard day, sweetheart. How was school? Okay. Emma brought cookies for everyone because it's her last week before moving. Ivy climbed into my lap. I'm gonna miss her. I know, baby. It's hard when people we care about go away. Is Daddy going away too? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why would you ask that? He's been sleeping on the couch, and you both look sad all the time. Emma's parents looked sad before her daddy moved to the apartment. 7 years old, and she was already reading the signs. How had I let it get this far? Daddy and I are just going through a difficult time, I said carefully. But we both love you very much, and that will never change. Did you have a fight? Something like that. Maybe you should say sorry. That's what you tell me to do when I fight with Emma. If only it were that simple. Sometimes grown-up problems are more complicated than kid problems. That evening, Graham came home at his usual late hour. I was waiting in the living room, having put Ivy to bed early and spent 2 hours rehearsing what I wanted to say. We need to talk, I said as he walked through the door. Do we? He set down his briefcase and looked at me with those same neutral eyes. I know you know. About the lunches, the texts. I know you've been collecting evidence. Evidence. He repeated the word like he was testing how it sounded. Interesting choice of words. Graham, please. Can we just talk about this like adults? Adults. Another word repetition. You mean like how adults communicate honestly with their spouses instead of lying for months? The calm in his voice was more terrifying than shouting would have been. I never meant for it to happen, I said. It just evolved. I was lonely, and he was there, and he listened to me. He listened to you. Graham sat down across from me, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. What exactly did he listen to? What do you mean? I mean, what did you tell him about me? About our marriage? About our daughter? The question caught me off guard. I don't understand. Sure you do. When you were having your cozy lunches and intimate text conversations, what lies did you tell him about your terrible husband who doesn't appreciate you? My face must have given me away because Graham nodded slowly. Right, so not only did you betray our marriage, you humiliated me to a stranger. You made me the villain in your little romance story. That's not… I didn't mean… What did you tell him, Eulalia? That I'm cold, inattentive, that I don't love you enough? I couldn't answer. Couldn't admit that, yes, I'd painted him as the neglectful husband who drove me into another man's arms. And what did he tell you? That you deserve better, that you're too good for me, that he understands you in ways I never could. Each question was like a scalpel, cutting through my justifications and exposing the ugly truth underneath. It wasn't like that, I whispered. Wasn't it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you decided our marriage was broken, and instead of trying to fix it, you found someone to validate your complaints and make you feel better about giving up. I didn't give up. I tried to talk to you. I tried to tell you I was unhappy. When? When did you try? All the time. I told you I felt lonely. I told you I needed more attention. You told me I worked too much. You complained about my schedule. But did you ever once suggest marriage counseling? Did you ever ask me to help you figure out how to reconnect? Did you ever try to understand why I was working so hard instead of just resenting me for it? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. Because he was right. I'd complained, but I hadn't really tried to solve anything. I'd just found someone else to make me feel better. I was working those long hours for us, Graham continued. The Morrison project, the Henderson account, they're stepping stones to a partnership, to financial security for our family. I thought you understood that. But what about emotional security? What about feeling connected to your husband? What about talking to your husband instead of texting another man? We stared at each other across the coffee table that had witnessed 1,000 ordinary moments in our life together. Birthday mornings with Ivy opening presents, movie nights with popcorn and wine, arguments about bills and schedules and whose turn it was to handle bedtime stories. Now it felt like a courtroom, with evidence and accusations, and the slow, methodical destruction of everything we'd built together. Where do we go from here? I asked finally. Graham was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but final. I don't know if we go anywhere, Eulalia. I don't know if there's anywhere left to go. The legal office smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat across from Graham and his attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who had laid out my life in neat manila folders, like evidence at a crime scene. Mrs. Vane, she said, her voice professionally neutral, your husband is seeking primary custody of your daughter and an equitable division of marital assets. Given the documented evidence of adultery and emotional abandonment, we believe this is a reasonable request. I stared at the papers spread across the conference table. Phone records with Marcello's number highlighted in yellow. Credit card statements showing lunches I'd claimed were work meetings. Even a photograph of my car parked outside his apartment building last month. Emotional abandonment, I managed to say. That's rich, coming from a man who worked 16-hour days and forgot his daughter's school play. Graham spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. I never forgot Ivy's school play. You missed it because of a client emergency. I missed it because you told me it was the following week. I had it marked on my calendar for Thursday, and you told me Tuesday morning that it was Wednesday night. I couldn't reschedule a presentation for 40 people with 4 hours' notice. I felt the blood drain from my face. Had I done that? Had I deliberately given him the wrong date? You're lying, I said, but even to my own ears it sounded weak. Patricia Chen opened another folder and slid a paper across the table. This is a screenshot of a text message you sent to your husband on Tuesday, October 15th at 8:47 a.m. Quote, Ivy's play is tonight at 7 p.m. Try not to miss it. End quote. I stared at the message, my own words condemning me. I remembered being angry that morning, frustrated that Graham was already planning to work late again. Had I deliberately sabotaged him? Had I wanted him to miss the play so I could feel more justified in my resentment? The actual play was Thursday, October 17th, Patricia continued. Your husband had requested that entire afternoon off and had rearranged 3 meetings to attend. When he realized the confusion, he tried calling you, but you didn't answer. I must have been confused about the date. Were you confused or were you angry? Graham's voice was quiet but steady. Because I think you wanted me to miss it. I think you wanted to have another story about how I let you down. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I wanted to deny it, but the truth was sitting right there in black and white. I had been angry. I had wanted him to feel guilty. I had been collecting grievances like ammunition. Let's move on, Patricia said. Mrs. Vane, we also have documentation of financial misconduct, specifically charges to your joint credit card for meals, gifts, and activities related to your extramarital relationship. She slid another paper across the table. Lunch at Romano's, 87 tons, dinner at the Blue Crane, 134s, a bottle of wine I'd bought for Marcello's birthday, 65 todkons. Each charge highlighted, each one a small betrayal paid for with money that belonged to both of us. Those were just lunches, I said desperately. Work lunches. Work lunches where you purchased a $200 bracelet. Patricia raised an eyebrow. For your project manager. The bracelet. I'd bought it for Marcello last week, a simple silver chain with a small compass charm. "So you'll always find your way back to me," I'd said when I gave it to him. He'd smiled and kissed me, and said it was beautiful, but I'd noticed he never wore it. "Mrs. Vane," Patricia continued, "your husband is prepared to offer you a generous settlement. You keep your car, half the savings account, and shared custody of your daughter on weekends. In exchange, you agree to the divorce terms without contest." "Shared custody?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "She's my daughter. I'm her mother." "You're a mother who has been emotionally absent for months," Graham said. "Do you know what Ivy told me last week?" She said, "Daddy, why is Mommy always on her phone?" She said you've been distracted and sad and angry all the time. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you helped her with homework without checking your phone? When was the last time you read her a bedtime story without seeming like you wanted to be somewhere else? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. Because he was right. I had been distracted. I had been checking my phone constantly, waiting for texts from Marcello. I had been going through the motions of motherhood while my heart and mind were elsewhere. "I love my daughter," I said weakly. "I know you do, but loving her and being present for her are two different things." Patricia cleared her throat. "Mrs. Vane, I need to inform you that if you contest these terms, your husband is prepared to present additional evidence in court. Evidence that might be uncomfortable for you." "What evidence?" Graham reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. He turned it toward me, and I saw security footage from my office building. There I was, in the parking garage, kissing Marcello against his car. The timestamp showed it was during lunch hour, on a day I'd told Graham I was working late. "The building's security system is quite comprehensive," Patricia said. "There are several hours of footage documenting your relationship with Mr. Ford." I felt sick. "You had me followed?" "I didn't need to have you followed," Graham said. "You weren't exactly subtle. Different perfume, new clothes, staying late at work but coming home happy instead of tired. You stopped complaining about your job, but started complaining more about me. It wasn't hard to figure out. So you spied on me." "I documented the truth. There's a difference." Patricia leaned forward. "Mrs. Vane, I strongly advise you to accept these terms. If this goes to court, the evidence will become public record. Your daughter will eventually be old enough to read about her mother's affair in legal documents. Your family, your friends, your coworkers, everyone will know the details." The threat was clear. "Take the deal, or have my humiliation broadcast to the world." "I need time to think," I said. "You have until Friday," Patricia said. "After that, we file the contested divorce petition and begin discovery. I should warn you, discovery can be quite invasive. Financial records, phone records, interviews with friends and family members. It tends to get messy." I looked at Graham, searching for any sign of the man I'd married, any hint of love or forgiveness or willingness to fight for our marriage. I found nothing, just cold determination and the steady gaze of someone who had made up his mind. "Graham," I said, my voice breaking, "please, can we try counseling? Can we try to work this out?" "You should have thought of that before you started working it out with someone else." I made a mistake. I was lonely and confused, and I made a terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can rebuild. "How?" His voice was genuinely curious, like he was asking about the weather. "How do we rebuild trust when you've been lying to me for months? How do I believe anything you say when you've become so comfortable with deception?" I didn't have an answer. Because he was right. I had become comfortable with lying. It had started small, claiming I was working late when I was having drinks with Marcello, saying I was too tired for conversation when I was really saving my energy for text exchanges with another man. Each lie had made the next one easier until I was living a completely separate life. "I'll change," I said desperately. "I'll be different. I'll be the wife you need." "I don't want you to be the wife I need," Graham said quietly. "I wanted you to want to be my wife. There's a difference." The words hit me like a slap. Because they were true, I hadn't wanted to be his wife. I'd been going through the motions, collecting grievances, building a case for why I deserved something better. Mrs. Vane, Patricia said, gathering her papers, we'll need your decision by Friday at 5 p.m. I suggest you consult with your own attorney. As we stood to leave, I made one last desperate attempt. Graham, what about Ivy? What about our family? He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. Ivy will be fine. She'll have 2 parents who love her, just not in the same house. As for our family... He turned to look at me one last time. You ended our family the first time you kissed him. Everything since then has just been paperwork. The courtroom's fluorescent lights cast a sickly pallor over everything. I sat beside my overworked public defender, watching Graham's team present their case with ruthless precision. Affair evidence, lies, financial misconduct, emotional neglect of Ivy. 3 months after the papers, Marcello had vanished to Boston, leaving me with a studio apartment and every other weekend visits. Witnesses painted me as selfish. My own sister admitted I'd never sought counseling, just resentment. Judge Rodriguez asked the brutal question, "Did you discuss your marital problems with your husband before confiding in another man?" "No, Your Honor." Her ruling came swiftly. Primary custody to Graham, visitation every other weekend and 1 midweek evening, home awarded to him, assets reduced to 30% for my misconduct. The gavel fell. Graham looked exhausted, not triumphant. In the hallway, his lawyer blocked me. Communicate through channels. That night, in my silent apartment, no calls came. Marcello was gone, friends distant, family disappointed. I'd craved attention, validation, got it briefly from a man who fled at consequences. Now I had none. I'd traded a flawed but loving marriage, daily motherhood, community respect for fleeting fantasy. Alone with my reflection, I finally understood. The attention I'd chased had cost everything that truly mattered.